can make this happen. All right. Oh, we have liftoff. Yay, hooray. It's really great to see everyone this morning. I'm just, really pleased. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. I met someone during the break, and they said, didn't even know this was here. And it's, oh, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And I said, oh, yeah, we were kind of under the radar for a while. But I'm just so happy to have this opportunity to be here with you today. And I heard that there were lots of you meditating at 10 o'clock, so great. I was downstairs doing a class, and it just is, it's always good to come into the room afterward, because the room always feels so good after people have been sitting in it for an hour. It's like they bring so much to the room when they come and sit in the room. So this is a good feeling. So I am your substitute teacher today. I switched with Lama Tom so that he could have some family time today. So in any case, but it's really good. It's really good to be here, even though I had to choose my topic very late last night. So what I chose was Dharma by heart, learning the Dharma by heart. And it's a little bit about the function of prayer in Tibetan Buddhism. And then hopefully, if we're lucky, I can introduce you to one of the more powerful and profound prayers that we use in Buddhism. And so the reason I bring this up is because, life can be a little bit up and down, yes? So we can have good days, we can have bad days. We can have days where the news is like good and days when the news is like not so good. And so we have to develop a way to sort of ride the waves of life and not sink. The Buddha, Shakyamuni, who lived 2,500 years ago, said a lot about the world and its suffering. And in his book of sayings, in the book of collected sayings of the Buddha called the Dhammapada, which people ask me, is there a Buddhist Bible? And I say, well, the Buddha taught for 45 years. So yeah and no, because teaching for 45 years straight, when they finally wrote them all down, it was volumes and volumes and volumes. So a little bit tough for people to study on a regular basis. So what happened was that small compilations came together, and these smaller compilations are easier to study and to digest. And then when Buddhism went to Tibet, about 1,000 years ago, the Tibetans condensed them even more. Because who was going to study and read all of those hundreds of sutras? Who was going to do it? So they created monastic institutions for monks and nuns to study the scriptures, digest them, and then study the commentaries written about them. And some of these great masters wrote commentaries on the sutras. So the Buddha, during his lifetime, spoke about the nature of this world, and he spoke about the nature of suffering. These were his two main topics. Because he said he denied being a god, because, of course, when you're an exceptional person, people try to pin stuff on you, right? And they tried to identify him. They said, okay, which of the Hindu gods are you? And he's like, not a god, sorry. And they said, well, then are you an ordinary person? And he said, no, I'm an enlightened person, meaning that he had attained a spiritual state of transcendence of the world and its suffering, which, of course, is kind of technical. It's kind of technical, transcendence of the world and its suffering. So it's easier for them to say, okay, check, which God are you again? Yeah. Anyway, so, this is what makes Buddhism so unique, because even though we have a founder, the founder denied being divine. And so people come to Buddhism and say, okay, so like Buddha is God, right? And the answer is, not exactly. And so because of this, it's a little bit awkward for us to talk about prayer, right? And so the Buddha, in his description of the world in the Dhammapada, and for those of you who want to look it up, it's Dhamma, P as in Paul, A, D as in David, A. Dhammapada, okay? So this short compilation really summarizes the Buddha's teachings about the world and about the nature of suffering. And he begins by saying, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world. And so what this does is it puts everything right in our own hands. We are what we think. We create the world with our thoughts. And so we are basically the creators of our moment-to-moment experience. And this is kind of both great, but a little scary. Because if we are the creators of our experience, that means we have a little responsibility. You know, I don't want to get into some people would call it blaming victims, and I think that's not right. That's not what it is. It's more about possibility. Let's go a little deeper into what the Buddha said about the world. The Buddha called the world samsara, which I hear is the name of a cologne now. Hi, wear beautiful samsara and feel samsara all day long. I mean, I just can't. And there are several things that have been named samsara, if only they knew. Not the smartest marketing campaign, I'm just saying. So the Buddha called this world of suffering samsara because it's a sound-alike. Samsara is a sound-alike for the word for ocean. It's not the same word, but it's a sound-alike. And so the idea is that this is ocean, vast. Suffering is everywhere, and you may think you can run from it, but you can't. Suffering is baked into the system of being human in this imperfect world. Being an imperfect being in an imperfect world, suffering is kind of baked in. But we can have an impact on our suffering. We can reduce the suffering by learning how to do three things. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. Pretty simple. Everybody says, well, what about the Eightfold Noble Path? And I'm saying, don't ask me too many numbers, it's hard. Just the four statements are just as good. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. So 4 is way easier than 8. Plus, these 4 statements summarize the entirety of the Eightfold Noble Path, because right thinking and right attitude and right livelihood and all of those things are subsumed under the 2 statements, do no harm and practice virtue. And what this means is, do no harm means don't hurt yourself, don't hurt other people. Practice virtue means to take care of yourself and to benefit others. And tame the mind means to meditate, to rest the mind in its own nature. Rest the mind so that our mind is still, and when our mind becomes more still, it's easier for us to tell the difference between harm and benefit. And so the Buddha's teaching on this is that for those who can practice these 3 things, eventually samsara's sufferings can be transcended. And any one of us can become a Buddha. We all have something called Buddha nature. And so what this means is we all have the capacity to become like the Buddha. And this is what my teacher said differentiates prayer in other religious traditions from Buddhist prayer. Now, first of all, he said, when I asked him, what's the difference between non-Buddhist prayer and Buddhist prayer? He said, well, first of all, I have to tell the truth, And he said, I haven't studied non-Buddhist traditions carefully and thoroughly. So he said, I could be making some wrong assumptions. So he said, forgive any wrong assumptions I may be making and correct me. And so he said that his understanding is that in the theistic religions, that is, the religions that posit a God that is in charge of the world and all of the beings in it, that prayer is about turning toward the Creator and asking for their help in adjusting circumstances around us. If we are not healthy, we ask for health. If we are not wealthy, we ask for wealth, and so on and so forth. And so we ask for things. And he said, my understanding about the teachings on God is that God is not like any human being and that there is no human being who is like God. And I said, roughly yes, but let's not talk about Jesus here because that gets complicated. So I said, for all intents and purposes, sort of, yeah. And he said, well, then what's different about Buddhist prayer is that we are turning our attention in prayer to someone who was once just like us and wants nothing more than for us to become like them. And we're not asking necessarily for them to adjust reality for us. We're asking for them to help us transcend suffering and its causes. Transcend suffering and its causes and become Buddhas. And so now this brings us back to suffering and its causes because we've talked about quite a few things in the last 10 minutes. So the whole idea of what is the cause of suffering may have gotten lost. So we are what we think, all that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world. So that means we create our own happiness and we create our own suffering through our thoughts. And what it comes down to is that the Buddha said that we cause suffering for ourselves through attachment, aversion, and ignorance. He called them the 3 mental poisons, but they really all stem from attachment. We want what we want when we want it, how we want it. And so the idea is that this sort of this self-willfulness, creates a world in which we expect to be disappointed continuously. Right? I want this. So if I don't get this, this means that I will be very unhappy because I didn't get this. Or conversely, I don't want this. And then if I get this, that means I'll be disappointed because I got that instead. So really it all comes down to grasping. Grasping, clinging, and fixation. And we can see how grasping, clinging, and fixation works in our own life. I mean, family, shall we talk? Families have expectations of each other, and we're always disappointing our family, or we could be disappointing our friends, or we could be disappointing ourselves. There are always expectations we are not somehow able to meet. And so we have to deal with that. We have to find a way to cope with that, to deal with that, to work with that. Because this is the nature of the world we live in. The world is impermanent and imperfect. And this is not a news flash, we are also imperfect and impermanent. I can't read the expiration date, it's on the back. But suffice it to say that the Buddha said, like the rock and roll singer said, no one gets out of this life alive. Okay, rock and roll. So, in any case, since all of us are impermanent and all of us are imperfect, then we have to work within this impermanent and imperfect world to recognize the causes of suffering. So when we cling to something and fixate on something and want it to be so, we're actually demanding something of the world that it may not be capable of giving us. And so this is why the Buddha said it was better to be like the tree that can bend in the wind. to be less invested in expectations. Now, parents, this does not include you, because your children expect you to set limits for them. I'm just saying, this is a Buddhist commercial. Parents, you have to have expectations of your children. And employers, you do have to have expectations of your employees, but this is a whole different deal. This is about how you work with those things inside you. It's not about the external rules that you have to apply to your family or to your workplace in order to keep harmony and goodness. It's about how we emotionally deal with the expectation we feel. How we deal with what we feel. I think that'll be my Mr. Rogers quote for today. So how does the Buddha tell us to pray? Well, the Buddha, of course, denied being God, and yet, even while he was alive, people placed their hands together and bowed to him because he was really a power greater than themselves. He was the higher power, as it were, for so many when he was alive. And then even after he died, based on things that he had said, they decided they weren't going to make any statues. Well, something happened with that. So the Buddha's, because based on things the Buddha said, they kind of got the idea that statuary was out. But what they eventually gave into was because people wanted a focal point for their devotion and faith in the Buddha. And so they started with footprints, baked into clay, right? They had these, tablets with the Buddha's feet, and people would toss flowers on them or touch their heads to the feet of the Buddha as they would if he were alive. And so that's how it started. And then, the rest is history. Human beings be needing this. We need a face. We need someone to turn to. We need a friend. And so the Buddha became more present in a physical form. In the end, it's actually okay, I think, personally, because human beings do need a higher power to rely on, who can restore us to our own internal sanity. We need that higher power. We need it. And so then prayer becomes a relationship with that higher power. Prayer becomes our relationship with it. And in the early centuries of Buddhism, a prayer developed called the prayer of 7 branches. The prayer of 7 branches. And this prayer of 7 branches had to do with 7 things that one would do if one was actually in the presence of an enlightened being. It starts with bowing and homage, seeing them as being greater than ourselves. Then after that, making offerings. We've done really well here with the offering part. And it's beautiful, right? And we can actually, if we don't have beautiful offerings like these, we can also make offerings in our mind. And so the prayer references, I make these offerings both in reality and with my imagination of, flowers, incense, lamps, perfume, food, music, everything that pleases a human being. And we offer it not so that the Buddha, will grant us some kind of wish, but by praising something and offering to something, we become something. We're nurturing that which is Buddha within us when we pray. We are nurturing that which is Buddha within us when we offer and bow. One Buddhist nun said to me one time, when you are bowing really to your own Buddha essence in front of you, manifested as a fully enlightened being, which we're not yet. But the idea is that through this, we build this relationship with our own inner Buddha nature, strengthening our own inner Buddha nature by bowing to the Buddha. And I thought that was awesome. And then the 17th Karmapa made a statement. He said, I know y'all bow to me when I'm walking by and stuff, and that's really nice, but he said, if only you could appreciate yourselves and bow to the Buddha within you. If you could bow to yourself and feel better about yourself, wouldn't that be amazing? So all of these nuances can go into our experience of Buddhist prayer. So we've got homage, we've got offering, then we begin to make the aspiration to work with our mind. The next one is a confession. We confess all faults. Yep, we don't hide them. We say, okay, Buddha, I messed up. I hurt myself or I hurt someone else, and I'm in it too, and so forth. And I did this wrong, and I did this wrong. Please help me purify this wrong within myself. And then after the confession, we rejoice in the good that we have done. I rejoice in all of the goodness that has been done from beginningless time until now by all beings and myself. I dedicate and rejoice in this. What I love about Buddhism is that it is not just about not doing something. It's about doing something. It's about both, right? Because there are not just a list of 10 unvirtuous actions. I know, it's like, what is it with 10? 10 unvirtuous actions, there are also 10 virtuous actions that you're supposed to do. I gave a talk at a Christian church once about Buddhist ethics, and the lady came up to me afterwards saying, thank goodness, she said, somebody has given us credit for doing something right. So anyhow, so in any case, so now where have we come? We've come from homage and bowing, we've come from offering, we've come from confession, and now we've rejoiced in the goodness. Then we ask the Buddhas to teach. That's a real virtuous thing. Buddhas, please teach us. Please help us to transcend suffering and samsara. And then the next one is we ask the Buddhas to remain in the world and not die just yet. To remain in the world and continue to teach us who need them. So I think that brings us up to 6. Homage and bowing, offering, confession, rejoicing, asking the Buddhas to teach, and asking the Buddhas to remain in the world. So that leaves 1. And the final one is dedication. We dedicate the goodness that we have accumulated through all of these foregoing. We dedicate all of this to enlightenment. And this is something that we may not be able to learn the 7 branches by heart. Let's face it, we're busy. But if we could, on a regular basis, recite just 4 lines of prayer that summarize the 7 branches, that would be something, yeah? So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to see if I can help you memorize something so that you've got it in your heart. Learning something by heart. And I need a helper. Julaine, could you bring me a red book so I can be sure if it's in the red book, then you can take a picture of it, okay? Yeah, then if it's in the red book, you get to, Oh, by the way, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, thank you. By the way, there's a wonderful teaching was given in the 1800s by Jamgon Khantrul the Great. And he said each one of these offerings counteracts something that's wrong with us. Bowing and homage counteracts arrogance and pride. Offering counteracts stinginess and greed. Confession, it actually, in the text it says it counteracts anger, because, anger is kind of like the worst thing we do, right? It counteracts anger because we're trying to correct it. By confessing our faults, we try to correct them. Rejoicing, it counteracts jealousy, because get it this way, when we rejoice in the good that others do, we're not being jealous of them right then. It counteracts our jealousy. So now that takes us to asking for teachings. And that reverses ignorance. The teachings help to reverse ignorance. And then asking for the Buddhas to remain present in the world, what the text says is it counteracts the view of permanence. Okay. We ask for the teachers to remain means that we admit the idea that they are impermanent like the rest of us. And so it's internalizing the idea of impermanence. And then finally, dedicating is really what it does is it ripens all the previous 6 so that it becomes a cause for enlightenment. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway. Okay, so each one of these 7 things counteracts something bad. Let's see what I've got here. Yep, it's in here. So if a couple of people could pass along the red books, could help us pass the red books out, and then I'll ask you to turn to page 9. And then you can use your cell phones or whatever to take pictures of these 4 lines and then take them home. Because this way, we're busy people. Trying to recite a 7-branch prayer every day is, it's a lot. But if we do recite this prayer, then we're doing these 7 things that bring about goodness inside our hearts and minds. It's like you steep a bag of tea to make the essence of the tea come out, right? So we steep ourselves in Dharma to make the essence of Buddha come out. Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys have? Oh, okay. Yeah, because we have enough. We do have enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have enough. Yeah. Yes? Yes, it should be page 9 in the red book, and it's going to say 7-branch prayer at the top. Okay, let's go down to the last 2 lines. Page 9, thank you so much, guys. Sorry to make you run. Yeah. It's page 7 in some? Thanks very much. Well, gosh. I forgot we have 2 different versions of this book out there. So the top of the page will say the 7-branch prayer, and on the side it'll say 3 of 3. So when you get to 7-branch prayer 3 of 3, then you are on my page. Okay, now, if we go down to the last 2 lines on the page, in Tibetan, and forgive me, my pronunciation is really bad. In Tibetan it says, yes. Oh, very good. Okay, yeah. Okay, page 9. Yeah, page 9. It's page 9 in all books. In all books, it's page 9. Chaksal wadang chuching shakpadang jesuyirang kul jing sowayi gewa chunze dagi ji sakpa tamche dagi jangchu chir ngo o. Okay, well, that's probably not going to get memorized anytime soon. But if we look at the English, it says, I dedicate all virtue, however slight, I have accumulated through homage, offering, confession, rejoicing, exhortation, and requesting to awakening. That's all 7 right there. Pretty cool, right? Chaksawadan chiching shapadan jesu yirang kershing sohai kewa chunse dagi jisapa tamche dagi chanchu chirngo. So, what you can do is you can use your phone, take a picture of just those last lines. It is the world's shortest 7-branch prayer. It was written in the 8th century by this man, Shantideva. Shantideva, who spoke a magnum opus poem called The Way of the Bodhisattva, wrote this prayer. And I love it that it all can be condensed into these last 2 lines. So you can do a 7-branch prayer without having to work too hard. So what I'd like to invite you to do is I'd like to invite you to do this prayer. Take a picture of it. Try to do it in English every day. Don't worry about Tibetan for now. That'll be another time. We'll do workshops on how to pronounce the Tibetan, stuff like that. But even if this is something that speaks to you, if this is something that speaks to you and speaks to your idea of prayer, this is really great. And because if you think of the Buddha as your higher power, if you're thinking of the Buddha as your higher power, and you imagine that the Buddha is there in front of you, and you put your hands together and say, I dedicate all virtue, however slight, I have accumulated through homage, offering, confession, rejoicing, exhortation, and requesting to awakening. Wow. It will gradually over time change your outlook. Prayer does not work immediately, although your mileage may vary. So it might kind of, make your mind feel good right away. But when it's repeated on a regular basis, what happens in Buddhist prayer is that we forge this connection with the Buddha, and we gradually develop an awareness of our own Buddha nature, our sort of inner wisdom that helps us get where we want to go and do what we want to do in a good sense, become who we could become, and so on. And so if we connect to the Buddha in this way, reversing our ignorance, reversing our attachment, reversing our anger, reversing, right, our view of permanence, and so forth, and cultivating love, compassion, and wisdom. If we can do just this every day, it's like taking vitamins, right? And then what'll happen after a while is that after a while, you'll get it memorized. If you recite it every day for 6 months, I bet you'll have it memorized. And then, if ever you're in the car driving to work and you say, "Oh, I forgot to talk to the Buddha this morning," then you can do it right there in your car. Anyway, I've done it myself many times. So let's recite it together, and then I'll take questions about Buddhist prayer. Does that sound good? Okay. In fact, because we got a little extra time here, let's go to the beginning. That is on page 7. We're going to do the long version of the 7-branch prayer in English first. Okay? And that way you'll see the it gets ornate. Let's just say, as you read it, you'll see the ornate language that Shantideva spoke spontaneously one fine day in the 8th century. Begins with the words, with body, speech, and mind. Are you ready? Here we go. With body, speech, and mind, I pay homage to all those lions of humanity, as many as there are, without exception, who arise in the worlds of the 10 directions and 3 times. Through the power of this aspiration to excellent conduct, may I see in my mind all the victors and bow to them with as many bodies as there are particles in all realms. On each particle, I imagine as many Buddhas as there are particles, surrounded by Bodhisattvas. In that way, I imagine the Dharma Dhatu totally filled with victors, with all the sounds of inexhaustible oceans of song. I fully express the qualities of all those victors. I praise all Sugatas. I offer those victors sacred flowers, holy garlands, symbols, ornaments, the best of the best of parasols, the finest lamps, and sacred incense. I offer those victors sacred fabrics, the finest of scents, heaps of medicinal powders equal in size to Mount Meru, in particularly excellent realms. I also imagine presenting to those victors whatever offerings are unexcelled and vast. Through the power of faith and excellent conduct, I pay homage and present offerings to all victors. I confess individually all harmful actions I have done with body, speech, and mind, under the power of attachment, aversion, and bewilderment. I rejoice in all the merit of all the victors of the 10 directions, of the Bodhisattvas and Pratyeka Buddhas, of those training and beyond training, and of all beings. I exhort all the lamps of the 10 directions who have attained passionless Buddhahood through the stages of awakening, all those protectors to turn the unsurpassable wheel of Dharma. With palms fully joined, I request those wishing to demonstrate passing into nirvana to abide for as many kalpas as there are particles in all realms for the benefit and happiness of all beings. I dedicate all virtue, however slight, I have accumulated through offering, confession, rejoicing, exhortation, and requesting to awakening. All right. I just thought that would be fun to talk about Buddhist prayer and how we do it and why we do it, and give you an example of a very simple prayer that praises the qualities of awakening and at the same time reminds us that we have those qualities inherent within us, and that by praising the qualities of Buddhas on the outside, we develop those qualities on the inside. We become like what we admire. And so if we admire the Buddhas and interact with them in this way, slowly we will develop those qualities within ourselves. So if you want to, like I say, if you want to take a picture of those last 4 lines and take it home, and slowly you'll be able to memorize this one. And then you'll have it forever. See, that's the cool thing. I can remember stuff I memorized as a child. I bet all of you did that too. Everybody probably memorized one thing. Okay, song lyrics, that's easy. Anyway, but I cannot today remember the entirety of The Walrus and the Carpenter. But I love the puns and the weird language that Lewis Carroll created for that poem. Yeah, anyway. Okay, we have time for questions. So if you have anything that you're curious about or anything you want to ask, you can use the 2 question microphones. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lama Kathy.
Hey, thank you.
You'll correct me, I'm sure, but regarding prayer, since we have humans, we have Buddhas, and we have gods, if I want to, I can pray to the Christian God, as well as trying to become Buddha.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you reminding me about this, because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was asked by a Christian woman if she took the vow of Buddhist refuge, if she had to give up her faith in God. And he said, no. He said, if you get a new friend, you don't get rid of your old friends. Now you have two friends. So he said, it's perfectly fine. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this teaching. I struggle with the concept of the deities because
sure.
I know we have deities, but then we don't have a god.
I know.
And so I'm,
Oh, yeah.
I guess I've tried to do research and I kind of just get lost in the sauce.
I can help you. I can help you. And,
Thank you.
And basically, it's a semantics problem. It's a semantics problem because it started long, long ago. When it started long ago, when Buddhism came from India to Tibet, and the word deva and devi were the words that came from Indian Buddhism to describe awakened beings. And so Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who have enlightenment, okay, were described as being devas. Here in the prayer, they call them victors, which I think is really cool, because then they're not gods, they're victors, which really makes me happy, because that's really more of what they are. They're victorious over samsara. But yeah, it's a semantics problem that I think there's just really been no good solution, except for a language like victorious ones. Because they're definitely, so Deva and Devi mean God and refer to the gods of Hinduism. And so when Buddhism went to Tibet, they translated Deva and Devi literally into the Tibetan word for God and goddess, Hla and Hlamo. So we've got a problem. They are transcendent beings, so I guess you could say they're like gods to us, but they are not. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's a problem we have, and we just have to explain that it's a semantics problem and say, yeah, now that we've explained it's a semantics problem, we're still going to use the questionable language anyway. We're still going to fall into the habit, as the Tibetans did, of calling them deities. It's a problem. And we'll keep tussling with it. The awakened ones, the victorious ones, that's much easier. Other things that people might want to know. Yeah. Yeah.
You often refer to the opening verse of the Dhammapada, with our thoughts we make the world. And the implication to me is, in the teaching, is that, okay, well, let's start making the world. But in reality, we have been making our world. We're constantly making our world.
Correct.
What the teaching really is taking control of that process,
Yeah.
being more
Yeah.
conscious of our making of
Our
world.
role, right?
Our role in that
Yeah.
making it, yeah.
Yeah. No, I really do appreciate this.
Well, I mean, we're just unconsciously been doing it our whole life. Let's become conscious, I guess.
Well said. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. And I think the reason that he puts it, that they put those quotes right at the beginning, was to kind of drive that point home, that we can take control of the process of creating our world. And create our world. I love the term you use, consciously and purposefully. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Yeah, because this means that, and this is the value of meditation. This is where meditation comes in handy, because in meditation, we learn how to let go of thoughts and then return to the object of attention, the breath or whatever the object of attention is. And so by coming back again and again and again and again, we learn how to work with our thoughts, and we become aware of them, and then can begin to take responsibility for them in a kind of almost a parental way, and shepherd ourselves into better ways of thinking. Yes?
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Yeah.
Are there limitations to how much of our worlds we can create.
How much of what?
How much of our world, how much of our experience
Yeah.
we can create. I'm thinking about the what you mentioned, this kind of like maybe like an ignorant or lazy critique of Buddhism, of like just seeing it as like victim blaming, like you can control.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious about where the line is between
I get that.
what we can create and what we're subjected to.
I really do appreciate this because Dharma is very nuanced. The teaching, the Buddhist teaching is really nuanced. There are a couple of really good books out there that can help us understand this interplay. There's a book that I think I did a book study on a year or two ago. It's called Karma: What It Is, What It Isn't, and Why It Matters. And that talks about the interplay. That specifically talks about the interplay, because it's not just now that we're creating our experience of the world, but we have created our experience of the world, at the very least, since we were born this time. And if you believe in previous lives, all of those previous lives, we've been developing and creating our world and our experience over and over again, billions and billions and billions of times. And so the Tibetans, in fact, call the body and mind that we have right now, they call it the fully ripened result of all of the previous karma. And what this does mean is that we bring in a set of, I'm going to jokingly call them karmic presets. It's like sometimes you get into a friend's car and they've got all their radio stations preset into it, right? Boom, boom. So you're going to listen to their music whether you like it or not. And, so like that, right? So we come into this world with these sort of karmic presets. And this means that we will tend to like certain things and tend to dislike certain things, or certain things will tend to bother us and certain things will tend not to bother us, and so on. And so we bring those presets into our experience right here and now. And so that means that through meditation, we can begin to decide which of these presets we want to maintain, or which ones that we just want to change. Okay, and so is there a limit? I would say from a practical viewpoint, there is, because right now we have this karmic preset of this body and mind. And so yeah, everything has to be acceptable and workable within this setting, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't change the settings gradually over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've met people who say that when they've started meditating, they had a lot of anxiety, and that after they've been meditating for a while, they still have anxiety, but it doesn't last as long, which is really interesting, because they learn how not to feed it, which for most of us is so habitual, we can't stop feeding it, right? But over days, weeks, months, and years, gradually, we can change how we experience that anxiety. We'll still have it, but what we do with it and how we work with it will change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. No, thanks. Yeah. Let's see. Was there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One, and then these will be the last two questions. You, and then you. Okay.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Yeah.
On this note, so we're talking about limitations, right? The relationship to that with being conscious of your role in creating your reality. I wonder how you would describe the relationship between attachment or non-attachment and also being conscious of your role in creating your reality, right? How do you not become attached?
I know.
Right.
I know. How do you become unattached? I mean, here's the thing. The way my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, the way he put it, because he was talking about, we were asking, what's the Buddhist path? And he's like, we start out with all these bad habits, okay? And then gradually we replace the bad habits with good habits. They're still habits, okay? Bad habits with good habits, but then he said we learn, the deep and penetrating insight meditation of Mahamudra, and then we go beyond habit altogether. So it's like you need the boat until you get to the other side. So right now we have to be, for example, we have to be attached to Dharma right now, okay? And we have to be attached to doing virtue and avoiding non-virtue. We have to be attached to that right now because we haven't successfully crossed the dangerous water of samsara. You know, we're not the other side yet. Kempo Rinpoche told this story once of, actually, no, I can't remember whether I was present for this question or somebody else, but they said that a guy said to him, a guy in the back, it's like, I got his hand up, and he's like, oh, okay, so like, I understand Buddhism now. It's all about non-attachment. Okay, so like if Buddhism is about non-attachment, you're attached to Buddhism. Ha, 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 ha. You have to let go of your attachment to Buddhism. Ha, 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 ha. And Rinpoche is just really, he's dealing with it. He's there. And he says, okay, you have a point. Okay, you have a point. We are attached to Dharma, but let's take your logic and take it a little further, shall we? And he used the boat example. He said, so using your logic, you should be able to row that boat halfway across the lake and then just trip across the top of the water on the rest of it. Leave the boat behind and then walk on the top of the water to get to the other side, using your logic. He said, but I expect that once you get out of the boat, you're going to sink like a stone. And so he said, so what we have to recognize is that we are in this imperfect world and we are imperfect people, so we need Dharma right now. But of course, we can become obsessive and wrong-headed about anything, even Dharma, so we have to try to maintain the other aspect of the Buddhist teaching, which was the middle path that is free from the extremes. And so when we find ourselves demanding too much or trying to be perfectionistic, we then have to dial that back, you see, so that we can be more loving and accepting of ourselves. So it's like, it's all about balance. Did that address your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks for that. And then this will be the last question. Yeah, I appreciate these questions. You guys are good.
Good morning, and thanks
morning.
for your talk today.
Yeah, no.
So I've been coming here for, I think, like 3 months on and off, and I kind of have this larger question philosophically about the ideals in Buddhism being very beautiful, reducing suffering, having compassion, but inevitably human life is filled with interpersonal conflict. So I kind of have trouble with what is the distinction between healthy compassion and healthy self-love that isn't passivity in terms of like how you interact with other people. So I'd love if maybe, for example, if you're comfortable sharing something in your life, like an interpersonal conflict you had and how you managed it, because I feel like I think of these lofty ideals, but then things are still experienced.
Exactly.
And how do you actually use these teachings?
No,
Thank you.
I completely get this because it's all about, it does come down to nuance and balance, because we have to recognize that as one of my teachers, one of my lamas said, he said, just because you're compassionate doesn't mean you have to be wrong-headed, which I thought was a really interesting statement. And he said, it is never wrong to tell someone to stop hurting you. So I really felt that that was an incredibly valuable piece of advice, because he said you can be compassionate and still set limits and still maintain and set boundaries and safe and healthy boundaries and limits. Because it's, because we're human, we do tend to go to extremes. I mean, it's our thing. We don't do middle well. We do extreme, yes and no, all or nothing. We do extremes real well as human beings, but middle is so hard because it's middle, we have to be in both places, so it's hard to do. So the whole idea of being peaceful and compassionate, really then when we have an interpersonal problem, it does, what do we do? And I think clear communication is very important, because what the Lama said was actually true, which is if it's never wrong to tell someone to stop hurting you. And so that means we may need to choose how we say it, when we say it, and to whom we say it. You see what I'm saying? So we have to, it's something we have to then consider what is the healthiest and safest for us. And so I remember, right now I can't think of it. I mean, it's like somebody asked me a question and it's like, tell me something from your life, and I'm like, oop. But I can remember something that Rinpoche said. In a setting just like this, a woman came to the question microphone and said to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he said, my brother drinks a lot, and he's an alcoholic, and he's always asking me for money. My brother's always asking me for money. I know when I give him the money, he's not paying the rent, he's just drinking, right? Because, his family keeps telling me that they're suffering. And so, like, I want to stop giving him money. But he's my brother, I'm supposed to love him, what am I supposed to do? And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, the enlightened beings have limitless compassion. And he said, but we're not like that yet. Our compassion has limits right now. And he said, I can tell you how to gauge whether you've gone too far or not. And I'm like, yes, I'm listening. He said, when you begin to resent the person that you are being generous to, or the person you are trying to help, when you begin to resent the person you're trying to help, he said, you've gone beyond the limitation of your compassion. And you actually have to stop and back up. He said, because that resentment is corrosive and it will hurt you. And so he said, so you have to, if you're at that place with your brother, was the final advice. If you're at that place with your brother where you're beginning to resent him, then he said, it's going to be smart for you to say, I have done what I can for you, I can do no more. Okay, so which I felt was just, that's such a valuable thing. Just to know that we are limited and to understand and recognize our limits when we hit it, because that resentment's going to be the cue. That's going to tell us that, ooh, I feel that resentment, so that now I got to back up and take care of myself until I'm in a better position to go forward. Okay, yeah, no, I'm super glad we talked about this. Well, because of time, we have to stop. But I just realized I forgot to do the prayer at the beginning. I get so excited about being here with y'all, I don't know, I just forget stuff. I'm old, anyway. So let's gather together all the goodness that we did by reciting and learning the 7-branch prayer and so forth, and then dedicate it to all sentient beings. We get to share it. We'll start with the words, by this merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the Bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Okay, thanks everyone. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next time. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you, Mr. Soundman. Yeah.